Hi there, this truck with pocket snakes. I'm gonna see if I can finish up this last, 15 inches or so, this 275 paracord overlay on this 4-foot snake whip. So I had to stop the stream earlier because somebody was calling and couldn't pause it because they wanted me to run and do a couple errands. So anyway, I'm gonna just get into it and start. Anyway, I thought I would get to work on this and see how this is. It's hard to figure out where to put the camera on these things because the camera is on an arm on a tripod, and I'm trying to figure out where I have to be to laying these strands. And I'm going to set it up just to my right so I can actually see what I'm doing. But if you're watching this, I'm doing this, taking the time to put this all on video, so I thought that I would do it in a live stream. Last time I had 1,100 people watch the silly live stream of me sitting and braiding, so there were a lot more people interested in the subject, although it didn't say what I was doing. So I got 3 people watching the stream now. So this is I'm Chuck with Pocket Snakes. I'm finishing up the last 15, 16 inches of this 4-foot pair of snake whips. So, oh, nice. Yeah, smash the like, guys. I appreciate you. If you want to see more of this content from me, I've got a lot of videos I've uploaded. This is an experiment in doing it live. I mean, there's no reason not to do it live. It's not like I can edit video worth a darn, but so I'm doing good. Somebody said, "How are you?" I'm doing well. What do you use pocket snakes for? So pocket snakes are a type of whip. So they don't have a solid handle like a bull whip or a stock whip. There's no stock or no solid area. So they're flexible throughout, and they were designed originally to coil up in a bag or a saddlebag and fit in there, and you could close the saddlebag on the whip and you could pull it out when you needed it. But it's a nice term. Turns out lots of people look for pocket snake whips, and most of the things I make will fit in a pocket. It might be in a big pocket. This is a 4-foot whip with a coil diameter of about 15 inches probably. How long have I been doing this for? Been braiding for about 14 years, making whips. I got kind of obsessed with trying to get the whips to flow the way I wanted. Never thought anybody'd be interested in whips, but I found braiding soothing, and they're interesting studies in tension art because you're layering layers of tension trying to get an exact roll or an exact behavior out of the whip that you want. So I'm not 100% sure how to answer some questions, I guess. Most people, I think, use them, go out to the park and throw them, but would you guys like to see do I sell them? Yeah, yes, I do. There's a website called pocketsnakes.com. Same name. When I got the name, I looked for bullwhip.com and somebody had that, and pocket snake was a term. So this is the first of this matched pair. So this is a 4-foot. It's got a coil size 15, 18 inches. And it's got a very directional movement. This hasn't been rolled. This just came down from braiding. So this is the one I'm getting a second one to match this one. So helps keep the paracord in stock. If you occasionally sell one of these things, people from all over the world order the things. It's usually not people, well, there's some people from the US, but hardly anybody anywhere near me. So it's almost all people out of state. Sent a couple whips to Australia, which I thought was kind of funny. Sent one to Belgium and a couple to France, a couple to Canada. So it's kind of nice to have people like what you do. Never really worked on my YouTube channel all that much. It's been a place where I've posted videos for people that might be interested in making their own whip. How long does it take to make a whip? So each of these 4-footers, the core takes the very first, like, shot loading and stitching together the core is like half an hour. And then there's a spiral wrapped bolster that runs up through the whip. That takes about half an hour. And then there's about 3 hours putting 2 plated bellies, one about halfway, one 3/4 of the way down the whip. And so far I'm at almost 4 hours into this whip, and I've still got over a foot left to plate. So there's quite a few hours to set and make one of these. It's a crazy number of hours, but I like making them, and I enjoy watching people, just be ecstatically happy because I've always wanted a really nice whip. So get a lot of people that are overjoyed and sometimes turn around and order another whip of a different style. I do some bull whips and some stock whips, and I work in paracord and nylons, whip maker cord. Done some kangaroo whips, but kangaroo whips are a problem because if you stick them on a site, you have to make sure you exclude California because they're crazy. They're about importation of kangaroo products. So I do some cowhide whips too. It just depends on what somebody needs or wants. Primary use of whips is to make things go bang, to break the sound barrier with supersonic whips. I've got people that order 4-foot snake whips and drive cattle in cattle chutes. That's one use for whips. And if you're on the ground, you have a lot of stuff around, a short whip is nice. Most of the cowboys these days don't really ride horses. A lot of them ride ATVs around. And they carry a pistol instead of a whip. We've got sport cracking people that like stock whips and sport hybrid whips, and I make those. They go out to the park and throw whips. And then you have stage performers who really like whips, and I make very compact whips that work well on stage, whether that stage is, for a play or whether it's a part of a burlesque show or what it is. But I build whips for anybody that wants whips. So yeah, classic Americans. We love things that go bang. That's true. People have told me I should go to a gun show and sell whips. I'm like, does it sound really like a good idea to go to a gun show and throw a whip that goes boom when most people don't know what a whip sounds like and all of them are armed? I don't think so. I think I'd get kicked out really quickly if I brought a bunch of whips to sell at some gun show. So I've had a lot of recommendations as to where to go. I decided I'd vend at the Great National Western Stock Show in Denver, Colorado back in 2020. There were nearly 1,000 vendors, 750,000 people, and that's when I learned how crazy I am, because I was the only person there hand making the items that they were selling. Everyone else was reselling stuff from other places made by other people. And everything in my booth was made by me. And I was there for 2 weeks and taught 1,200 people before I lost count how to throw a whip, which was interesting. Is it cheap to make, and how much would it take to buy one? Well, they're fairly inexpensive to make. I mean, this 4-foot whip has, so there's a 2-foot section that's probably got 80 foot, and then another 3-foot section's probably got 100 foot of cord, and then the top coat here has a couple 100 feet of 275 paracord. So you got like 500 or 600 foot of cord at 5 cents a foot. And the cord is relatively inexpensive, and the material to build the core is relatively inexpensive. There's cheaper and faster ways to build a whip than the way I do it, but I do it because I want it to be a certain way. These whips were, there's a pair of them, so it's about $500 for 2 whips. So that's how much they run. But how much can you build them for? Well, you figure 500 foot of material or 600 foot of material times 5 cents a foot. There's not that much material. So, but I'll have, in these 2 whips, I'll have well over 20 hours of time by the time I finish these 2 whips. I'll probably have closer to 30 hours of time. So I'm not really making much. Probably making $12, $15 an hour sitting and making my crazy whips that I like. But the point isn't necessarily to make money. It is, but the point of it is I love doing it. And even if I wasn't selling any of them, I'd be making them and probably giving them away to people that I like. I did that when I started. But I encourage people to go start making whips, learn to make whips, and figure out what you don't know, what you do. And there's lots of people out there that have great videos. I didn't look at any of them before I started, so I made a bunch of mistakes just trying to figure out, well, how do you get it to taper, and how do you do this, and how do you do that? And I could have saved myself a ton of time, although I wouldn't have learned as much. And part of the process here I like is I really like to learn things and figure out how to improve upon different methods. I say I find something that works. Now I'm on the hunt for something that works better. Is there a way to make it even better? Try and purge everything you hate about a particular whip, and then try and bring in everything you like or dream of it doing, and put that into the whip. And then you just keep that process up, and after 8 or 10 years of braiding, you'll have something pretty cool. Or you can use somebody else's design and shortcut the process. And, you can go watch my videos and go get the materials and go make a whip. And I encourage you to do so. Mind you, I will tell you that I make this look a little bit easier than it is. But it's very doable by anybody who has the patience and understands a little bit about braiding. But I can only braid so many hours in a day, probably 3 hours of braiding in a day. My first live stream of the day was 2 hours and 15 minutes or something. And I went from 20 plate and about a foot into the whip, or maybe 14, 15 inches into the whip, and I added 4 strands at a time till I got to 32 plate. And after 2 hours and some minutes, it's like I hadn't thought about the fact I probably should get something to eat, something to hydrate, and use the restroom, and talk to the people that had called me in the meantime. But I make all sorts of things. And I've got a bunch of videos on here, but you can find me as Pocket Snakes on Instagram or YouTube, or I have some of my videos echoed over. They were supposed to be transferring automatically to BitChute as a backup in case somebody got upset that I was making whips or something like that on YouTube. You never know what the rules are. You can't sell whips on Facebook or on Instagram, but you can share pictures of them, which is nice. And I am trying to read the screen here on this cell phone, but it's a little bit hard. So, hello, we've got 41 people watching this live stream. That's amazing. So, but this is my 3rd live stream. I did one 5 years ago when I first got on YouTube, making some crackers. And I thought, well, I haven't tried live streaming in a long time. Maybe somebody be interested in watching the overlay of a 275 paracord whip go on. So at 32 plate, you have 16 strands on the right and 16 strands on the left. So you're going under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and over 8 strands as well on each side for a whip maker plate. It's kind of a square braid, actually, instead of a true round plate. But that gives it, if you align it with the belly of the whip, which is right here, this is the second overlay that was hand braided on here, and you align it, it gives it more directionality, and it forms a bit of an oval shape, and I like that in my whip. Some people will roll their whip to even out all the tension and round out the core, but I like my whips to be slightly oval, so my whips are a little different. It gives them a little more directional stability. But literally there's a playlist on YouTube called 275 Paracord whip builds. I've got a couple whip builds in there. And one of the things is the core for these 2 4-foot whips. And I did a tungsten shot loaded 2.5-foot whip or 30-inch whip for somebody. So they wanted a super heavy. So I built one of those in white and black right after building one in turquoise and yellow. And this one's steel shot loaded with very, very fine steel. It's about, I think, 4.5, 5 ounces of steel in this. And it's finer than table salt. It's, I think, S330 is the name of the steel. It's a sandblasting medium. You can buy 50-pound bags of steel sandblasting medium and use it to shot load. Advantages, it's not bumpy. Disadvantages, if you don't put multiple layers of woven fabric or wax it, it'll try and leak out. But with multiple layers, it does a great job as a weighting material in whips. And it's round steel. But yeah, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel. I'll try and live stream more. I had no idea people would be interested in a live stream. So we got like 50 people watching. That's pretty incredible. So I don't watch live streams on YouTube. I don't watch TV though, so I'd rather sit and braid a whip than have a television on. So feel free to ask questions. I'll try and answer the questions if you have questions for me. I've got a lot of videos on, just different projects, different braiding. How long have I been working on this for? So this particular whip, I started working on this one Sunday, and I braided the first 1.5 feet. Took me 2 hours and 15 minutes to get 1.5 feet in and up to 20 plate. Or I think I did it Sunday. Could have been yesterday. For the overlay, if that's what you're talking about, for this overlay. I put 2 hours and 15 minutes into it in the live stream that I ran earlier today, and we're 20 minutes into this, probably. I have no sense of time. I'm pretty time blind. Looks like 25 minutes the stream's been going. So, I mean, basically at 32 plate, I'm down to, so that's about 8 inches there from down here where I need to go. So I've gone halfway since I started the stream, and I figured I had about an hour, so I'm making okay progress. How much longer do you think would it take to finish it? So I'm going to be finished with this braiding of the overlay in probably 25 minutes. Then I have to make a build up for a heel knot, because it's a little snake whip. And the heel knot is, that build up process takes me half an hour or so, maybe an hour. And then I have to tie I missed a stitch because I'm busy gabbing. Okay. So then I'll put an 8-bite Turk's head and probably do it in 3 passes at 275. There's a video where I did a white and black whip that I just shipped out last week on putting an 8-bite 3-pass Turk's head and 2 tones. I'll probably do the same kind of a knot, but don't forget I have 2 of these whips. So this is number 2 that I'm getting to the same stage. I'm building it as a matched pair for somebody who ordered a matched pair. So and I'm going to have to move the camera back a little bit. But I'm braiding this vertically because I like to watch the tension in the whip twist and turn, and that way I can balance the internal tension of the whip a little bit better because it's on a swivel on the other end. So I can watch the the braiding line shift a little bit as the tension changes internally in the whip. And this whip has a pretty high tension on it. Like I'm braiding these strands pretty tight, at least here at the hilt. Helps keep the whip away from the body. How did I get into making these? Well, I went to a show and somebody had a whip. I don't remember where the show was. And the guy was in a wheelchair, and he was selling these whips. He had ordered the whips. The whips were made by, first whip I ever picked up to throw was made by Peter Jack out of New Zealand. And this guy in a wheelchair was selling it. And I said, well, what's the story? He says, well, I ordered these 2 whips from Peter in New Zealand. They were beautiful kangaroo whips. One was 18 foot, one was like 6 foot. And he got in a car accident in between when he ordered it, and it took a couple years or something like that. It took him a while to get the whips in because there's a waiting list of some sort. I don't remember the whole story about that, but I thought, well, I picked it up, and I used to fly fish. And so the one thing you don't want to do when you're fly fishing is cross the line, because then the end of it becomes a whip, goes supersonic, and you got to tie a new fly on the line. But the tension buildup is about the same for throwing whips, especially long whips. And loading up a fly rod. And so, and the guy wanted $1,850 for this beautiful whip. And I didn't have $1,850. I thought, well, how hard can it be to make a whip? That's the wrong question to ask if you become obsessed with things, or you get hyper-focused on things, asking, how hard is it to do this? Because I made a couple hundred whips over a summer, trying to get something approaching what that whip was like. Never got close in that first summer, but you build a couple hundred whips and you braid until your hands bleed because you're just trying to get it to do what you want. And you learn a lot. I never thought I'd ever get to where I could make whips that did what I wanted, but the better I got at building them, the more I could control what I wanted it to do and how I wanted it to behave. So I got into it because it was so expensive to buy that I couldn't afford the whip. But it's a beautiful whip. But I basically pursue what my idea of perfection is every day. And almost every day I'm making whips or making crackers or braiding things, cutting material, cutting strips of leather, beveling strips of leather, building things with beveled strips of leather. And I do a bunch of different styles of whips that are supersonic. I mostly do supersonic whips. It's braiding tapered things is about as complicated as I've found I liked, is building tapers, braided material. It's actually a form, this whole thing is a form of rope art. It's just a very, very fancy, well-built piece of tapered rope. Whether it's made out of leather or made out of paracord, doesn't really matter what it is. I'm going to tension this off and back the camera up a little bit. Looks like we got, what's that say, 34 or 54 or something like that. I don't have my glasses on. I should go get my glasses. Anyway, I found that if I tension this off, I don't lose the tension I'm packing into the whip when I let go of it as much. But there's lots of people that order whips. I use them for a lot of different things. I try and build things that'll last a lifetime. Somebody takes care of them and doesn't throw them into the dirt or throw them against a brick wall. Okay, so I'm going to trim these tails off down here. So you'll notice this is barred cemented together here, where I've locked off the tension in all these strands. This is the whipmaker cord compared to the 275 paracord. So the plated bellies in this 4-foot whip are all this whipmaker cord that's less than half a millimeter thick, where this compressed is about a millimeter thick. And it's 3/16 wide. But when I run over the end of this, I'm gonna Just want these out of the way. How long ago did I start making these? Like 14. Started 14 years ago. And I do a little bit of everything. I never thought I'd be making other people whips. I thought I'd just be building some stuff for myself. But I've been doing this for a while. You'll notice that the angle is changing to be more and more flat as I get down to where it's thicker and thicker. But I could have bumped this up to be 36 plate, but I didn't see a reason to. Like I said, I don't have my glasses on, so I'm doing this mostly by touch. You can learn to do a lot. Oh, 36 people. If you just found me, please hit the like, the share, the subscribe, whatever. If you're interested in making whips or the subject of whip making, I just started doing a little bit of live streaming because it's easier than trying to edit video. I don't have to upload it, download it, copy it, put it on a computer. At the end of the day, I like to have all the mistakes and everything else just in the videos because I always was upset that I made a lot of mistakes, and that's my process that I learned by, is making a lot of mistakes and having to fix them. But you learn to fix things that go wrong. It's a useful skill in the world. Feel free to write a comment or ask a question. I'm doing this for you guys who might be interested in making whips or picking up a new hobby or new skill. The world needs more makers who know how to make things. You never have too many people that know how to do things. You can always have a shortage of them. So I'm braiding this in a ringed snake pattern from the very tip of the whip on down. So this particular pattern, you have to add 2 strands on either side of the red as you add strands to keep the rings so that they meet all the way up the whip, and so that the rings don't touch or stop being rings. And so it's a bit tricky to add 4 strands at a time, which is really 2 strands that are folded over the core. what are they used for? So this is a snake whip. It's a pretty compact whip. Some people use them for stage performances. Some people use them to drive cattle into chutes. There's people that go out and do whips in the park. There's stage performers that get on stage and do all sorts of different acts, including burlesque. There's people that take them to a luau. There's also people that use them for BDSM and that type of thing. So there's tons of different things you can use a whip for. So, but I've been making whips, and I've talked to all sorts of people that use whips, and not a lot of people that set and make really good quality whips. There's some of them. There's a few of them in the U.S. Some of them even on YouTube. Lots of people have told me about people to go watch. It's a lot like watching television, though. It's I have a hard time watching videos or television. The main thing I tell people when they ask what the whips are made for or used for, I tell them they're designed to go bang. These are built to be supersonic whips, so with very little effort, it amplifies the input force until it breaks the sound barrier with vigor. So almost all the whips I build are supersonic. I build a few pocket quartz that aren't, but most of the whips I make are supersonic whips. Do a lot of snakes, do some bull whips, do some sport hybrids, do some stock whips. Keeps my days interesting because I'm constantly making different kinds of different things. And I'd say my favorites are, pocket-sized snake whips, small, short snake whips. But if you want a snake whip that's 15 foot long, I'll build you one. You want a bull whip that's a rodeo bull whip, I'll build one of those. Just kind of depends on what people want whips for. And the difference between a snake whip and a bull whip is a bull whip usually has a solid handle or solid core in this part of the handle, where this is very flexible. And I categorize whips in a couple different ways. There's what I call mass whips, which are whips that have mass, have quite a bit of weight, and they rely on the mass moving, and then as part of the mass stops, the rest of the whip accelerates, and that's a mass whip. You have a whip with weight to it. When you flick it, it'll roll, and as the whip mass comes to a rest, the rest of the whip that's left is traveling twice as fast when half of it comes to rest. And the other type of whip is a fulcrum whip. So like a long stick with a popper out on the end of it, or a tail out on the end, like a buggy whip or carriage whip or a lunge whip. And then all the other types are some blend of those two, of a mass whip and a fulcrum whip. I'm getting down to the last couple inches. How's my prediction going? Said I probably have an hour on this. I'm at 44 minutes and I'm down to 3 inches. I'll probably braid 4.5, so probably another 10-15 minutes on this. Oh, you already started answering. Yeah. I mean, I love the subject of whips. I'll sit and talk to people for hours about whips. And I try and encourage everybody that has the slightest interest in whip making to take the time and Learn a little bit about it. Go try making a whip. You'll know in, 8 or 10 hours of messing with it before you'll know if you really like making whips. You'll know whether you like braiding or not probably in the first 20 minutes. I teach a class at Tandy Leather locally, or two, on building whips and building and braiding. But the more people that get interested in building whips, the more people will be there in the future, because I won't do this forever. Most whip makers have a limited lifespan of braiding whips because it's hard on your hands. Somebody's asking a question. Let's see. Give me just a second, guys, because I can't see the screen. Okay. I never really thought much about whips or heard much about them, but stumbled into your stream and interested in hearing you talk about them since you seem to have a lot of experience. Oh, yes. Do you want to see the dogs? Hey, Sammy. This is Sammy. He's a little corgi. He's my quality control. If it moves like a whip, he borks. He's more popular than I am, I'm sure. You want to come in here, Penny? Come here. Come here, Penny. Good girl. Penny. Hey. Penny's being shy. I have 2 corgis. They're a constant entertainment and trouble. And they're always underfoot. But he comes in and it's like, what are you doing? You'll notice these 2 strands, which I started the whip with, are shorter than the rest of the strands. And the reason for that is I strip these out and put them on first, and they're braided, and then I measure all the rest of them right on the whip. And the difference in length has to do with I'm always measuring off these 2 strands as I'm adding strands. And I'm measuring them while they're full of cord, so they end up being longer once you remove the center core. So, but it's kind of fun building whips. You get a couple reactions. You go out to the park, start throwing a whip. People are like, ooh, what's that? Or get the heck away from me. Bah, run away. So. I had to ban Sammy from going out to the park with me because one day I was throwing an 18-foot bull whip and getting long rolls, and he was chasing the cracker on the end of it. He was doing backflips in the air trying to catch the tail of an 18-foot bull whip, and he dislocated his back and landed wrong, was paralyzed for couple days of worried about him, so he doesn't get to play with the whips anymore. He used to chase them. Thought that was great fun. Hey, what question do you have, Golden Geek? What kind of question do you have? going to take a second for it's about a 5-second delay between me saying something and it showing up in the stream. I can't type to you, so go ahead and type your question. The Golden Geek. That's a good name. Here, beginner in whips, and I'm using 100 meters for a build. 100 meters would be 300 foot. Yeah, you'd be fine if you're building a 2-foot whip. So that's plenty. So if you built it without shot loading it, it'd be a very light whip. But you can, one way to build a snake whip is you can set and just braid a 9-inch braid where you start with like 8 and drop down to 4 and then drop to 3 and then twist 2 together and pin it off. And you can come back and braid over the 9-inch section to make an 18-inch section. And you start with, if you had 8 plate to start the whip and came down, you'd start the next one at like 12 plate and you braid over that all the way down to the end and drop to 18 inches where you have 2 twisted together, and then you can come over the top of it with like maybe a 16 plate or so and drop it down to where you have a twisted pair, or you could tie on a falls. You make a 2.5 foot, 3-foot whip with 3 layers of braiding if you wanted without a core. I prefer whips with a core and preferably a shot loaded core, but there's lots of ways to build whips. Biggest problem when you're doing 2-foot or sub 36-inch whips is getting the roll you want in a whip. It usually requires a shot load. It also usually requires some thought to make it tapered in the right way with the right amount of tension to make the whip work well at 2 feet long. 2 feet long is really short. I think you may have misread. They said 12. Oh, 12 foot long. So, yeah, I misread because I can't read this screen. It's cracked. Sorry. So a 12-foot whip. So the rule of thumb is your strands, your longest strands in a whip will be on the right-hand side, and the left-hand side will be time and a half the overall length of the whip, usually a safe measurement. So if you're going to start with a center bite start on a whip, you're going to want to have each of the strands on a 12-foot whip. So you have 24 foot plus 12 is 36 foot. So just the overlay on that whip is you have 36 foot times, if it's a 16 plate, you're multiplying that number by 8 times maybe not 36, because some of them they're going to drop by 18 inches each bump down or so. but you're still talking about at 16 plate, a 12-foot whip, you're going to have 36 times 8, so you might not have enough for that, just for the overlay, let alone the core. Because the core on a whip like that's going to be 3/4 the length of the whip or more. So, kind of hard to say. How does the Whipmaker cord compare to the Paracord in whip performance? So it compares very favorably to 275 Paracord as far as how it moves when it's built into a whip. And so it's a little bit wider than the 275 Paracord. It's a little bit slicker. It's not as rough of a weave. It has more of a satin weave to it. And it's half as thick, and it weighs half as much. So it does pretty good. I'm going to tension this way up because I'm past the bump on the whip. Oh no. No, I didn't cross the strands. What did I do? No, they didn't cross. I haven't tensioned them down in that area yet. So, give me a second here because I can't read and I have to get it to just one more stitch here. Okay, so I'm going to tension this up, and then I'll set and answer questions. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're back at red. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're back at red. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now my hands are on fire. I'm going to pull the pin out from the second belly. Move it into here. So you'll see there's a bulge right here. This is the end of the shot that's in the bag here. And so this end will get cut off right in here on both whips. So you need more than 100 meter of paracord, right? I would recommend that, paracord's fairly inexpensive, at least here in the States. It's like $50 or so, $54 for a spool of paracord, 550 paracord. Or if you're going to make a whip with it, get 650 paracord, which is already got the guts pulled out of the paracord. That's my advice. So hold on for a second, I'll show you the difference. So this is 275 paracord, which has 5 inner strands of paracord. So there's 5 nylon strands to hold the weight. And the oversheath is not designed really to hold the weight. It's all these 5 strands. That's what this whip is made out of. This is 650 paracord, which is 550 paracord sheath, where they didn't do it around the strands. It's pulled from the machine that braids the sheath for about a 550 paracord. And it's infrared heated and put through a press to press it flat. So it creates a very flat material. And then let me find a strip of whip maker cord. This is a strip of whip maker cord. You can see it's somewhere in between those two. You can see it's narrower than the 650 cord, and it's thinner, so give you some idea. So I like measuring things, so this is the 275 paracord with the guts in it, and it's where it's touching is like 2.5 millimeters. If you squish the heck out of it, it's 1.5 with the guts in it. If you grab it down here, this is gutless, and it's 0.78 millimeters, and it's zeros, so 0.78, 0.8. But when you let go, it really wants to be about 1 millimeter. Like if you pull the cord through it, it's about 1 millimeter thick. 650 cord, right about 1 millimeter thick. Whip maker cord, 0.6 millimeters thick. So it's thicker, its thickness is less. In terms of, like if you're an inch person, that's 0.023. And this is 0.0385. It's easier to see in millimeters. It's 5/128ths or 3/128ths. So it's not quite half as thick, but it's close. Anyway. But when I was talking about, distances and the oval shape that's left after layering this. So this whip is 22.10 millimeters thick. When you rotate it out to the side, it's pretty round. It's 22.18. Here it's 21. So it's really close to perfectly round. It's down here at the base, but up further on the whip, like it starts at about 5 millimeters down here at the loop end. So it tapers from less than 1/4 of an inch at the narrow end, but more than 1/8 of an inch. And it tapers to almost an inch at the base. So it's about 0.90, 0.85, 0.85, 0.9 inches. So it just gives you an idea. Sometimes it's handy to have little tools with giant screens when you can't see. Well, I think that the finer plated materials allow the whip to make a more uniform whip. So the 275 is thicker and has more physical nylon in it than the whip maker cord, but you get a higher internal friction. So this whip has more body to it in 275, right? so it has more of a body to that whip. It has a roll, bend radius, you know. And in the amount of stiffness the whip has is partially the internal friction and partially the compression. And this whip will break in really quickly. It'll be a nice whip. I'm going to put a little barge cement on this so I can set it down, let it dry. So this is not to hold the layer on. This just literally locks the tension off, so if the pin comes out or if the dog comes and messes with it, it's just an easy thing to quickly tie the... Remember, everything that's under this or over on top of this area is going to be a leather buildup for a heel knot. So, and I think that, you know, you ask people questions, you're going to get a million different answers because everybody has their own way of doing things. Part of the reason I do these videos anyway is to share what I do for whips. I'm going to back this up and give you a better view of what kind of a taper this thing has. So I'm going to lock that off. The tail or towel. Tie. No, it's a snake whip. I built this to be a snake, and it is a snake whip. I build a lot of snake whips. I build some bull whips and snake whips, and I have some stock whips that I've built, but generally I build snake whips. I'm going to scroll up so you can see, but this is the rig. Sorry for the light. And it goes from a 1/4 inch to almost an inch. And it's a fantastic snake whip. It'll be a beautiful snake whip for the person. I built a matched pair. My goal was to get them within a 1/4 inch of length or an 1/8 inch in length of each other and within 5 grams of each other on 2 4-foot snakes. That might be a ridiculous standard to try and build to, but I wasn't too far off of my 1 hour to finish this live. But I'm happy to sit and talk to people and talk about whips. So I've been trying to help people learn to make whips and learn to throw whips, and so it's one of those things where the more people you get and teach them to throw a whip, the better. The bigger the market becomes, because if you don't know how to throw a whip, why would you buy one? And you can check out my videos. I've got a whole bunch of videos here on YouTube where I test the whip. They were literally meant just to document the fact that it threw fairly well. And the tail is when the bow whip, and we work on the flexible part. So this whip has a quick attach loop on the end of it to attach a falls or a cracker. So let me find a falls here. So for a short whip like this, here's a falls. So this is about a this is a short falls for a shorter whip, but then the cracker has a quick attach loop like so, and so you can fold a cracker and put in there. Then you can take and put the falls. We have the tip of a whip. You can fold the falls up through. So, but this makes a nice falls with a cracker. Now you could also put a long cracker like this on this loop, but it get some idea. Hey, and Sammy comes to inspect the whip. Well, this is Chuck with Pocket Snakes, and feel free to email me. You can email me over at pocketsnakes@pocketsnakes.com if there's things you're interested in with whips. You can go to pocketsnakes.com and check out the website if you want. I'm on Instagram as Pocket Snakes or Pocket Snakes Whips, I forget. But pretty much all the social media, if you look up Pocket Snakes and Pocket Snakes Whips, you'll recognize my stuff. So please like, share, subscribe, share with your friends. Tell your friends about it. I'm glad you guys showed up and came, and I will try and live stream some more now that I know that people are interested in the subject. And here's the Sammy. Hey, Sammy. He would say hi if people were talking, but his favorite thing is whips. So, you guys have a great day. It's been a pleasure. And I'll post this back under the 275 Paracord whip builds section as the overlay. And then if you're interested, I'll do a live stream and put the fancy ball knot on the end of the whip. So thanks a lot. I'm going to shut down the stream. You all have a great day. Look for me in the future.